The head of the Tokyo Olympics has resigned over sexist remarks that sparked an outcry. That leaves the event in a major crisis, with just 5 months to go before the Games kick off. More on that coming up. And protests have entered a 7th day in Myanmar, with crowds demanding the return of ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi. This as the UN Human Rights Council meets this Friday to discuss the crisis. And the legendary jazz musician Chick Corea has died. Corea was described as a pioneer and virtuoso on the keyboard who broadened the scope of jazz during a career spanning 5 decades. We'll bring you more on his life and times later on. I'm James Creedon. Thanks for watching France 24. Now, Tokyo 2020 Olympics chief Yoshiro Mori has resigned on Friday and again apologised for sexist remarks that triggered a global outcry. Mori is a former Prime Minister. His departure from the Summer Games Committee is the latest blow. The event was already postponed by 1 year due to the pandemic. Now, organisers have now been left scrambling to replace Mori. Sharon Gaffney has the details.
With less than 6 months until the Games commence, the under-fire head of the Olympics organising committee has been forced to step down. Yoshiro Mori again apologised for making inappropriate remarks about women after claiming during a meeting that they talked too much.
大事なことはオリンピックをきちんと7月に開催するということでありますから、そのオリンピックを開催するためのそういう準備にですね、私がいることが妨げになるということであってはならないと思います。
The committee is now meeting to appoint Mori's successor. He'd been forced into a grudging apology after his comments sparked national and international condemnation. But the 83-year-old came under increasing pressure to resign as the controversy once more raised concerns about sexism in Japanese society.
これまでのその考え方の変革のいいチャンスというか。
The Tokyo governor, one of a small number of powerful female politicians, described Mori's comments as regrettable, saying she'd sit out a meeting with Olympics organisers earlier this week.
オリンピック・パラリンピックは何としてでも成功させていくというそのことについては何も変わりません。
But recent opinion polls suggest that resolve isn't one shared by most of the Japanese public, over 80% of whom say the Games should be postponed again or cancelled. This latest firestorm is likely to raise fresh doubts over the wisdom and viability of holding the Games in the middle of a global pandemic.
The UN Human Rights Council is holding a special session in Geneva on Friday to discuss the crisis in Myanmar. This after Washington announced sanctions on the generals behind last week's coup. Now, huge crowds thronged cities around the country to demand the return of Aung San Suu Kyi. This is the 7th consecutive day of protests. Meanwhile, a flag-raising ceremony was held to mark the country's 74th Union Day. The 12th of February is a symbol of unity and independence in Myanmar. Julia Kim has all the latest.
Amid ongoing national unrest, Myanmar's military raised the nation's flag to commemorate Union Day. Marking the 74th anniversary of the country's unification, the army announced it would grant amnesty to more than 23,000 prisoners. On Thursday, the head of the junta spoke for the first time since last week's coup.
လူစုလူဝေးနဲ့တွာလာနေကြတာကိုလည်းကျွန်တော်တွေ့ရပါတယ်။ဒါရီရ COVID-19 ကူးစက်ပြန်ပွားဖြစ်ပေါ်မှုနှုန်းမြင့်မားလာစေမှာဖြစ်လို့ဒီအချိန်ကာလမှာနိုင်ငံဝန်ထမ်းအချို့ဟာမတမာသူအချို့ရဲ့တွေးထိုးလှုပ်ဆောင်မှုတွေကြောင့်မိမိတို့ရဲ့လုပ်ငန်းခွင်များကိုထိထိရောက်လည်းဖြစ်စေဖို့ဆက်လက်ဆောင်ရွက်သွားပါမယ်။
But even as he was ordering civil servants to get back to work, central bank staff became the latest group to walk off the job, following the example of the country's teachers, medics and railway workers. Hundreds of protesters also targeted the Chinese embassy in Yangon for Beijing's failure to condemn the power grab. As the movement stretches into a 7th straight day, protesters are calling for tougher international action against the junta after Washington announced a first wave of sanctions.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Moscow is ready to sever ties with the European Union if the bloc hits it with economic sanctions. Relations between Russia and the West have come under renewed pressure over the jailing of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Pressure for sanctions has grown since Moscow infuriated European countries last week by expelling German, Polish and Swedish diplomats. This without telling the EU's foreign policy chief who was in Moscow for a visit. Now, Paris and Berlin say there must be a response to that, according to Reuters, who cited 3 different European diplomats. The EU is likely to impose travel bans and acid freezes on allies of Vladimir Putin. Now, Ukraine has banned it. The EU has yet to approve it, but one EU member, Hungary, announced this Thursday that it was starting COVID vaccinations using Russia's Sputnik V vaccine. Now, as the country's economy buckles under lockdown, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban hopes to be able to open up sooner by going it alone. Gulliver Cragg reports from Budapest.
Budapest's castle district usually throngs with visitors. Not under lockdown. Most restaurants are closed or open only for takeaway like this one.
Here in the castle, 80-85% of our guests were tourists, so you can imagine that they all gone now. Obviously, without tourists, it's not much we can do. We focus on the local clientele. Not much else we can do. We're just waiting for the opening to happen.
The Prime Minister promises that opening will come sooner thanks to his decision to buy the Russian Sputnik V vaccine.
Én megértem a vendéglátó soknak, meg a szállodásoknak is az elkeseredését. Vakcina érkezett, ezért a gazdaságvédelem átadta a helyét a gazdaság újraindításának.
No matter, he says, that the Russian jabs don't have EU approval.
Nem lehetséges, hogy azért halljanak meg magyar emberek, mert a brüsszeli vakcina beszerzés lassú.
But the move has raised concerns in Budapest. The independent MP Ákos Hadházi says Hungary took risks by rushing its approval of Sputnik V in order to score points against the EU.
Az egyik az az, hogy propaganda célokat folytasson, tehát a Brüsszelre mutogasson, hogy Brüsszelből nem jön a vakcina, és helyette majd minket ugye a moszkvaiak megmentenek.
Today, just 4 hospitals in Budapest are administering Sputnik V. Hungary has received 40,000 doses of the vaccine. But it plans to buy enough doses to vaccinate 1 million Hungarians, that's 10% of the population, using the Russian jab.
Gulliver Cragg there in Budapest. Now, usually known as the greatest human migration on Earth, this year's China's Lunar New Year festival will be unlike any other. Now, in the wake of a new COVID outbreak, China is calling upon its citizens not to return home. Despite the many personal sacrifices this requires, most are willing to comply. France 24's correspondents in China have this report.
Wang Xiaomin is from Gansu province in central China, but she works as a full-time nanny in Beijing. The Lunar New Year is the only time she sees her extended family, when they all gather to celebrate and prepare traditional foods.
这是我们春节的时候回家跟家人团聚的时候照的全家福。
But now, due to COVID travel restrictions, making the trip is just not worth the hassle.
回去当地政府，我们村上人的有一个群嘛，不是微信群，他们都通知我们在外地打工的，回家必须带那个7天的核酸检测证明回家，回去了还得报备，报备的人还得居家观察，但是还是当地不让你出去聚众那个，跟朋友去聚会不允许的。
Luckily, her son and husband are with her, but seeing in the Year of the Ox will be much quieter than usual. In normal times, this Beijing train station would be overflowing with travelers. But this year, the government's message is clear. Staying put is the responsible thing to do. According to the Ministry of Transport, there'll be 61% fewer trips this year than in 2019 and 22% fewer than last year when the pandemic first struck. Jin Fang's family lives relatively close by, just 1 hour by car. But she won't be seeing them this year. Instead, she and her friends have chosen to stay in Beijing and celebrate together. She's concerned about being caught outside the city if another outbreak occurs. Her employer agrees. They're offering incentives for staff to stay at home.
To encourage us to stay in Beijing, my company give us a gift combo to those who can't actually go back to their hometown. And I just got the gift this morning from the company, and we will have a bonus money exactly, and on the day we return back to work.
And so far, these measures have worked, with no local transmissions recorded in the 4 days leading up to the holiday.
Day 3 of Donald Trump's second impeachment trial concluded in the US Senate on Thursday. The former president is charged with incitement of insurrection over comments he made, allegedly encouraging his supporters to storm Capitol Hill on the 6th of January. Now, senators have been hearing testimony that the rioters believed Trump specifically told them to enter the Capitol and stop the certification of Joe Biden's election victory. Catherine Viette has more.
Trump told us to do it. That's the argument Democrat House impeachment managers are laying out in day 3 of the trial. The team shared social media, recorded video, and court documents to draw a direct line between Donald Trump's words and the crowd's actions to storm the U.S. Capitol.
You don't have to take my word for it that the insurrectionists acted at Donald Trump's direction. They said so. They were invited here. They were invited by the President of the United States.
We were invited here!
The impeachment case rests on proving that Trump knew his words would incite his supporters to violence. Using his speeches and tweets, the team argued Trump spent months laying the groundwork for a confrontation by repeatedly saying the election was rigged and his victory was stolen. The Democrats pointed to Trump's defiance as proof he knew what would happen.
President Trump's lack of remorse and refusal to take accountability during the attack shows his state of mind. It shows that he intended the events of January 6th to happen. And when it did, he delighted in it. He was asked by a reporter, quote, "What is your role in what happened at the Capitol? What is your personal responsibility?"
So if you read my speech, and many people have done it, it's been analyzed, and people thought that what I said was totally appropriate.
Up next are Trump's lawyers, who will have 16 hours to lay out their defense. Trump has already said he won't testify.
The jazz legend Chick Corea has passed away. The 79-year-old died of a rare form of cancer, according to a statement posted on his Facebook page. Corea is considered one of the pioneers of jazz fusion, someone who revolutionized electric piano en route to winning more jazz Grammys than any other artist. Cole Stangler takes a look back at his soaring career.
One of the most visionary piano players in the history of jazz, Chick Corea explored the intricacies and boundaries of the genre in a career that saw him pick up a stunning 23 Grammy Awards. He played with Miles Davis in the 1960s, contributing to a couple of legendary jazz fusion records, before forming his own group in the early 70s, Return to Forever, mixing acoustic and electric instrumentation with a Latin American influence. Over his towering career, Corea collaborated with other jazz greats like Herbie Hancock, Keith Jarrett, Stanley Clarke, and Bela Fleck. But his influence also extends into hip-hop, with his fusion records providing a wide supply of rap samples. In a final message posted on his Facebook page, Corea thanked his friends and fans.
It is my hope that those who have an inkling to play, write, perform, or otherwise do so, if not for yourself, then for the rest of us. It's not only that the world needs more artists, it's also just a lot of fun.
Corea already has more jazz Grammys than any other artist. The next month, he's up for 2 more awards.
Okay, that's all for this bulletin. Thanks for watching France 24.